Very good morning to you, Theo. Good to see you. When you're in a really, really, really deep hole, stop digging. That's the advice of the Daily Star on the front page with MasterChef's Gregg Wallace, who's been given some time off, shall we say, while his investigators try to work out what exactly he's done. But the story seems to be that the BBC knew an awful lot more a long time ago, before any of this kind of came to pass. 4 times they were warned about Wallace. We know from the Sunday Times yesterday, and Asma Mir, who's sitting downstairs doing Times breakfast, that she was, involved in a complaint about him, several years ago. Yes, and this is the story. Let's Gregg Wallace. We've heard the headlines. Everybody's got a picture about exactly what he's done, and the allegations are serious. But really, this is a story about the BBC. Yeah. Why can't they get to grips with these scandals? Right. Why is it when people make reports, serious reports with serious allegations to bosses, that they don't step in? The BBC were given, the government just gave the BBC an increase in their licence. The licence fee just went up, didn't it? Just at the end of Friday, last month, by inflation. Right. And it's going to go up by £5 as a result of the government just handing it out. Why not make it conditional? Yeah, right. Why doesn't the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, or some official at DCMS turn around and say, hang on a moment, we'll give you this, but over the next year or over the next 2 years, in order to get your licence fee to be increased again, we want to see action so that these allegations stop coming to light, because it seems to be endemic within the BBC. Well, Matthew Syed, who's coming on the show later on, wrote a great piece in the Sunday Times yesterday about how ludicrous it is that it's always about the complainers, and it's always about the person who's accused. It's never about the management. Yeah. Whereas this should be about the management, because the management clearly did know that things were going on and didn't do anything about it. And you have to then ask yourself, well, what else do the management know? Yeah. And what else are they not doing something about? And it's an interesting... I know you're not a fan of The Guardian, Mike. I'm really not. It's not, but they do have quite an interesting quote from somebody called Dame Vera Beardkin. Yes, I saw that this morning. Victims Commissioner for England and Wales. She says it's shocking that repeatedly we see this kind of behaviour being tolerated at the BBC, who do seem to disregard the obligations they have to protect people who go on television. Yeah. And well, she says the BBC's in the dark ages, which is a very damning quote, I have to say. And I think they are in the dark ages. They are, and what's more is they promote themselves often as being in, the bastions of virtue, that somehow the BBC, that these things, they're leaders in stamping this kind of behaviour out. Far from it. It's tolerated. It seems to be any time somebody makes a complaint, I don't know what they don't do anything. No. Well, they log it somewhere, but then nobody goes anywhere near it ever again. Let's have a look at Gregg Wallace and what he said on Instagram over the weekend.
Now, I've been doing MasterChef for 20 years. Amateur, celebrity and professional MasterChef. And I think in that time, I have worked with over 4,000 contestants of all different ages, all different backgrounds, all walks of life. And apparently now, I'm reading in the paper, there's been 13 complaints in that time. Now, in the newspaper, I can see the complaints coming from a handful of middle-class women of a certain age, just from Celebrity MasterChef. This isn't right. In 20 years, over 20 years of television, can you imagine how many women, female contestants on MasterChef, have made sexual remarks or sexual innuendo? Can you imagine?
I can't imagine, because I've never worked on a BBC television show, but apparently that place is a hotbed of innuendo. It's all they ever do. I mean, we don't come into the office here and go, hey, how's it all going? Funnily enough, we were just talking earlier, there's a panto season warning going out to people saying some pantos may involve saucy jokes and things that only grown-ups will understand. So we've decided here at Morning Glory that the only place for Gregg Wallace probably is panto. Yes. If he wants to be funny about, looking at women and making remarks about them. Yes, and that's... perhaps not MasterChef. No. These are really, he can end up in panto, but these are
you have to also remember that there's a serious side to this, because yes, there's Celebrity MasterChef, but then you've also got MasterChef Juniors.
Yeah.
You've also got MasterChef, where you're taking members of the public, some of whom might be quite vulnerable,
and many of them might not have complained.
And many
about
of them might.
that he did.
And you know, there's no, you know, it's a horrible aside what Gregg Wallace has said there about middle-class women of a certain age. But if there's a point that actually there are middle-class women out there who have the guts to stand up to him and the guts to come forward.
But why
and tell
should it matter
stories,
whether they're middle-class?
It doesn't. No, I don't. I completely agree with you. It doesn't. But that might infer that actually there might be some women out there who don't fit Gregg Wallace's stereotype.
Yeah, but again, I would go back to the BBC management problem.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, he's saying what he says there on Instagram as though this is the first time he's ever heard of anybody making a complaint. Presumably, at some point, he was told by somebody at the BBC, somebody's complained about you, hasn't he?
Yes, and or you know, I'd have thought that given how widespread the comments were, that somebody might have just balked, or somebody might have said that's a bit off, or somebody might have actually looked uncomfortable at what he said.
Well, I think there's no doubt that happened. But the other way to look at all of this, of course, is that some people are saying, you know, is this not just another witch hunt by the BBC? And are people not looking for this guy who hasn't done anything, as far as we're aware at the moment, and anything like on the scale of a previous BBC scandal, shall we say? You know, he said some things which are a bit off colour and he shouldn't have said. Right? I don't know what else he's done. Some people accuse him of touching them. They're not sure. One report, you know what I mean? But there's clearly a pattern which the BBC management should have done something about.
And it's a, you know, broadcasting, Mike, and you know this, broadcasting, we're in a position of privilege, whether you're on Talk or the BBC or on any of the television stations. You have a position of privilege to be there. It's also a position that comes with power as well, because you're up there. And when that happens, you would think that actually the managers at the BBC, the executives of the BBC, recognise that and say, actually, stop it and stop it properly and monitor the fact and make sure that it's not happening, because you are making people
And there are
feel
emails to that effect.
And there are, and then, or if it's not happening and it clearly didn't happen because it was clearly continuing, actually pull them off, because there are lots of other people who could present MasterChef, dare I say it to Gregg Wallace, who could present it a lot better than him.
Well, they always find other people to do certain shows, don't they? And that's the way that it all works. But I mean, the other thing for me as well, and I was listening to Stig Abel on Times Radio yesterday talking about this, that he said they interviewed a journalist from The Sun who said the problem with the BBC is it's full of these sort of middle-class posh people who don't really know how to deal with people like Gregg Wallace. They don't know how to talk to him. They don't know how to sort of speak to him in his own language, because they're kind of clueless about anybody who didn't go to Oxbridge and who hasn't got a PPE degree.
I had a news editor who once called them Jeremys.
Yes.
When I was a news editor.
Yes. I mean, I think there's a bit of that going on.
You chat to the Jeremys down at the BBC, and they had this, and he was a tough cookie from the northwest. Right. And he had a very similar view as well.
But interesting, I mean, Tessa in Leicester says this, Mike, the Wallace saga, even Hugh Edwards didn't get as much coverage as this, all the things going on in the world, have a great day. Well, actually he did. I think I would argue with you there. Hugh Edwards did get this coverage, and of course nobody suggested this is anywhere near the scandal that Hugh Edwards was.
And when the Sun broke the story, by the way, it was pilloried when it broke the story. Everybody was rushing to the defence.
Yeah, isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how nobody's rushing to the defence of Gregg Wallace? Is that a class thing?
I don't know, but you know, the Sun took an absolute and great journalism, by the way, to expose
they won awards for it. They won awards
journalism.
For it.
That people sort of
and they stood up to the John Sopels of this world, who were more or less castigated them as if they were ruining a man's life. You know, shortly before he pleaded guilty to being a paedophile. Yeah. So there's a lot of hypocrisy, as there always is. I mean, Marina Hyde has apparently been writing. I didn't read it, but Marina Hyde was writing in The Guardian about this, according to Matthew Syed. And I mean, Marina Hyde's the last person who should be writing about, you know, having taken the moral high ground. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, look, it's a sorry state of affairs, and I just don't see the BBC cleaning it up, Mike.
No.
You want to be we'd like to be sitting here saying, okay, it can't mitigate against every scandal. It's a huge organisation, but I would love to be sitting here, wouldn't we, and saying, well, actually, this is going to draw a line in the sand.
Well, it's one after another, isn't it?
And we just know that within 6 months or a year's time, there's going to be another scandal.
Well, there's another report coming out by KC soon into their handling of another scandal, you know, which will no doubt pour more fuel onto the fire. But it is absolutely ridiculous. Now, how about this? 5 months ago, I'd hate to take you back 5 months, but 5 months ago, here's what Joe Biden said about pardoning his son Hunter Biden.
I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know, and I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
So, breaking news, President Biden pardoned son Hunter.
Yes.
I mean, is there anything that politicians can't lie about?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised when I saw it. I looked at my phone this morning and I thought, hang on a moment. Didn't he say he wasn't going to pardon him?
He repeatedly said that he would not pardon his son.
Well, now he's saying that he will pardon him because he thinks he's been a witch hunt because he's he's his son, and it was very unfair that he was prosecuted, criminal prosecution, because they only did it because there was a campaign to get him as the president's son. He's of course the first son of a US president to be convicted of a criminal offence.
Yeah, I'm quite worried about Joe Biden because he's already started selling landmines to the Ukrainians. He's given them permission to fire missiles into Russia. He's done a deal with Hezbollah, and now he's pardoned his own son. And he's only got, another month to go. Yeah. So, I mean, what could he do between now and Christmas? You know,
it's the busiest he's been.
Yeah, I mean, literally before they spent the whole summer on the beach. Here's White House Press Secretary Karen Jean-Pierre on no pardon as well.
Let me go back to the first question of the briefing. I know you said not a lot's changed since yesterday and that it's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well,
I just said no.
She's great, isn't she? She's so rude. No. Well, apparently you're wrong. And then she doesn't ever brook any kind of, questioning at all. I mean, unbelievable. But there we are. So Joe Biden's pardoned his own son. I mean, it's a very bizarre system they've got over in America.